6 years ago, I was living in Birmingham, Alabama. I was 26 years old. I was working for a technical recruiting company as a sales representative. And 3 years before this time, Leslie and I had just graduated from Auburn University. And when I graduated from Auburn, as many graduates do, I had this vision of the American dream. And I pursued that like a hot pursuit, as they say on Dukes of Hazzard. Like for these 3 years. I mean, I really poured my life into my job. And during that time, Leslie and I were married. We bought a home in Birmingham and really began to settle into this life. And I would go, the company I worked with is a big organization. We'd have sales meetings, a lot of times in places like this. So I'd come to these meetings and I would see these great leaders, and I just aspired to be like them so much, to make the big money, to have the house. And I heard all the stories about their lake house and their cars and all these things, and I was completely immersed in this vision of just what I would call the American dream. And so I lived in this place for 3 years. I read every kind of Tony Robbins, get ahead in life, build wealth book, win friends and influence people, all that stuff. But at the end of 3 years, it had led me to complete destruction. I was at a place where I was so alone. And on the outside, Leslie and I, we had everything together. My family, our friends, everyone was so proud of us. Thought we were doing so well. I became very depressed. I was at a place where outside of work, I did not want to leave my home. There were friends that I would not talk to anymore. And a lot of times on the weekends, Leslie would want to go out to dinner or go meet with some friends, and I would not want to go. It was like a burden for me to be out and engage with people. If we went places and we recognized someone across the restaurant or across the room, I would kind of make sure I didn't make eye contact with them and just avoid them. My identity was completely wrapped up in my success. And it was mediocre success, but I realized that I never could make enough money to feel something in my heart. And I was in just utter despair. I had no hope. It was in the middle of this situation when God's love broke through in my life. I was at work one day, and one of my target accounts was a company called Maxis Construction. This is a little advertisement for them. They're in Birmingham, Alabama. So I had been calling the president of the company for months. I mean, I was a go-getter. I was calling, the head guy. I wanted to go meet with him. I tried to take him to lunch. Every time I called him, it wasn't a good time. We couldn't get together. And this one day I called him, and he said, "Yeah, Josh, I've got a couple minutes this afternoon. Why don't you come by and see me?" And so I'm like, oh, this is my shot. This is my chance. So that afternoon, I walk into his office. I've got my suit on. My shoes are shined. I've got my little portfolio, and I've got my game plan. I'm going to go in there and tell him how I've helped all his other competitors, how I've helped them save money. So I walk into this office, and I meet the man. His name is Bill Wendell. So I go in his office, and we sit down, and we just kind of have the normal conversation. We talk about just our lives. We don't really talk business much, just kind of getting to know one another. He asked me where I'm from, and we talk about football. It's kind of what we do in the South a lot. And I look behind Bill, and on his bookshelf, I could see books and pictures. It looks like he had been on some mission trips. And I began to kind of gather that this guy's a Christian. So we just continue talking. And Bill, he starts to ask me about my life. In a way that's really different. It's not superficial. And he just asked me about my job. And I sensed that over these months, he just kind of saw that, I was a hard worker. I was going after this stuff. And he asked me, he's like, "Josh, how are you doing?" And he asked in a way that, when somebody, you can ask somebody, "Oh, how are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, I'm fine." This was different. He cared about me. And when he said those words, it just went straight into my heart. And my response was, I began to weep. 15 minutes into this conversation, I am a mess. Any of you who've had dealings in business would understand that they don't teach you that in sales training. And it's not a great tactic for breaking target accounts. But little did I know that day that when I walked into that office, I met a man of God, a man who's in full-time ministry, who just happened to be president of a construction company. So Bill gets up and he comes over and he sits next to me. And he listens. And he cries with me. For an hour, I poured my heart out. All the hurt, everything, it broke loose. It just spilled out. And there was something in here, there was something in that office and in him that told me this is a safe place. And I can't recall exactly what all we talked about that day. He didn't say a whole lot, but he loved me. So praise God. From that time forward, Bill took me in his life. For the next 6 months, he allowed me to join his small group with other men. These are men who'd been in the faith for 30 and 40 years. And I come stumbling in there as a 26-year-old. These guys embrace me. They pour wisdom into my life. I learned how to pray for my wife. I watched these men pray for their children. It was discipleship. I began to read the Bible, and it was like a flood cut on and just came into my heart like I had never experienced before in my life. I had a complete conversion. I mean, a couple days after this, I'm at work, and I'm a different guy. I care about the people I work with and who work for me. I have value for them. And they're like, man, what's going on with Josh? In the middle of this, Leslie, I completely freak her out. You know, I'm like, I will do anything you want me to do, God, anything. I will quit my job tomorrow if you want me to. Bill gave me some wisdom in that. But you might say to me, like, Josh, that's a great story. And if you say that to me, I'm gonna say thanks. But there's something you need to know. This story is not about me. This story is about Jesus. Jesus is the one that met me on that sales call. He's the one that listened to me, that cried with me, that took me back into his arms after I had turned my back on him.